My sick parents told me when I was young that God made me so I would take care of them forever. I was an adult when they revealed that they were never sick and were just testing me. When I cried and asked them why they lied and forced me to give up my life for them, they said because that's how a real son proves he loves his parents. I said nothing. I couldn't even respond. They thought they won. Until this morning when she called 17 times before noon. My sick parents told me when I was young that God made me so I would take care of them forever. I was an adult when they revealed that they were never sick and were just testing me. When I cried and asked them why they lied and forced me to give up my life for them, they said, because that's how a real son proves he loves his parents. I said nothing. I couldn't even respond. They thought they won. Until this morning, when she called 17 times before noon. It started when I was 6. I'd sit in our tiny kitchen, perched on a wobbly step stool, carefully measuring out medicine for my mom. I remember hearing other kids playing outside, laughing and chasing each other. I asked my dad if I could maybe join them one day, but he said no. Those kids have plenty of friends. Your mom is sick and only has you. You have to put her first always. This was the beginning of how they took away my life. And slowly but surely, I became their everything. Their caretaker, their personal chef, their robot, whose only purpose was to serve them. I still remember the day they fully broke my spirit. I was 9 and got invited to my first ever birthday party. I stood in my room looking out the window, staring at my classmates holding balloons and cake. They asked for me to come out, but when my dad opened the door, he told them I couldn't go and hurried away. The reason I couldn't go? Mom needed help getting to the bathroom. I had to walk her to it and wipe her. Later that night, as I tucked her into bed, she stroked my hair and said, "You're special. God didn't make you like other kids. He made you so you would take care of us. Forever." I believed her words for a very long time. Deep down, I think I knew it was wrong, but I craved their approval so bad, I pushed these thoughts away. Until I turned 22, that is. I remember waking up to my mother calling my phone from her bedroom, demanding I make her breakfast because she's too ill. That's when it hit me. The manipulation, the isolation, everything. I realized I was a failure who let them manipulate me. I wasn't a victim. I was a spineless coward. I'd missed out on my high school graduation because Dad had chest pains. I gave up a college scholarship because Mom would starve if I didn't make her dinner. Even my first serious girlfriend walked out after realizing I put my parents first. I knew I had to find a way to escape, and that's when a miracle happened. I worked at a local pharmacy around this time. It wasn't my dream job, but I knew a lot about medications having spent my whole life sorting pills for Mom, and my manager noticed how much I knew. One day, he introduced me to this doctor who was running this program to get people into studying pharmaceutical science. This kind of program would have been a dream come true. I wanted to take it, but the problem was, of course, my parents. I remember being scared of telling them at first. But then this feeling came over me, and I realized I needed to do this. If I didn't, I'd regret it forever. And so, I told them about the offer. I told them we could look into professional care for them since I'd be gone. I even offered to pay for most of it because they always said we were poor. But of course, my mom broke into tears, crying that she'd die alone. And as she cried, Dad gave me that cold, disappointed stare and said, "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." I didn't even say a word back. For the first time in my life, I didn't give in. And over the next few weeks, I started researching programs for them. And while doing so, I looked into their finances. That's when I found it. Their savings could cover professional caregivers. My face went pale. I had asked them about getting caregivers a lot when I was younger, but they always said they couldn't afford it. Turns out they could. They just wanted me kept on a leash. That was my final straw. At least I thought it was. My actual final straw came later that night. It was just a few days before I had to give my answer regarding the pharmaceutical program. And conveniently, Mom had a health scare. She tried to hold my hand and began trembling, talking about how this might be it for her, but I didn't react. That's when she told me that same old line. "You promised you'd never abandon us." That did it. I felt a rush of energy I'd never had before, but I didn't yell or get angry. Instead, I spoke calmly, telling them every single thing I'd given up for them. I told them they were failures as parents, and that if God is real, He'll punish them for using His name to do what they did to me as a child. Mom sobbed dramatically, and Dad turned silent, but it didn't work. I refused to back down. The next morning, I called the doctor and accepted. I packed my bags while my mom cried, but I didn't feel a thing. Until just before I left, because that's when they sat me down and dropped the biggest bombshell of my life. Turns out, they were never sick. At least not to the level they claimed to be. They could have managed their whole life without me. They just didn't want to. According to them, having me give up my life for them was proof I love them the way a son should. They even showed me their medical history, confirming what they just said. I remember feeling everything come crashing down. My whole life was a lie. But if my parents thought I would just let this go, they were terribly, terribly wrong. I walked out that day and didn't look back. I moved into a tiny studio apartment near the university and started the program. For the first time in my life, I was free. But freedom, I quickly discovered, was terrifying when you've never had it before. The first few weeks were rough. I had no idea how to live on my own. Simple things like grocery shopping or doing laundry without planning around someone else's needs felt strange and unfamiliar. I'd wake up in the middle of the night panicking that I'd forgotten to give Mom her medication or help Dad to the bathroom. It would take several minutes of disorientation before I remembered the truth. My parents didn't take my departure well. The calls started almost immediately. Mom would call sobbing, claiming she'd fallen and couldn't get up. Dad would leave stern voicemails about my responsibilities. I blocked their numbers after the first week. Then they started showing up at the pharmacy where I still worked part-time. Mom in her bathrobe looking disheveled, telling my coworkers her son had abandoned her. Dad cornering me in the parking lot, demanding I come home where I belonged. Mr. Phillips, bless him, eventually had to ban them from the store. "This isn't normal, Jake," he told me after escorting Dad out, his hand resting supportively on my shoulder. "What they're doing, it's not right." I nodded, but part of me still wondered if I was the one in the wrong. 32 years of conditioning doesn't disappear overnight. The next escalation came when they somehow got my class schedule and started showing up on campus. Mom would sit in the back of lecture halls quietly crying. Dad would wait outside classrooms to confront me. I had to explain the situation to campus security, which was humiliating, but necessary. Through it all, I tried to focus on my studies. The program was intense, but I thrived in it. My years of practical experience gave me an edge, and professors often asked me to share my insights. For the first time in my life, my knowledge of medications was seen as a skill rather than a duty. I also started making friends, awkwardly at first. My social skills were basically non-existent, but my classmates were patient, especially Riley, a former nurse returning to school for her pharmaceutical degree. She noticed how I flinched whenever my phone rang and how I constantly checked over my shoulder. "Whoever you're running from," she said one day over coffee, her eyes gentle but perceptive, "they really did a number on you." I surprised myself by telling her everything. The words poured out of me in a jumbled mess of half-formed thoughts and buried emotions. When I finished, I expected disgust or pity. Instead, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "My mom was a narcissist too," she said simply. "Different methods, same result. You're not alone in this." Those 4 words, "you're not alone," hit me harder than anything else because I had always been alone. My entire life had been structured around that isolation. About 3 months into the program, things escalated again. I came home one evening to find my apartment door slightly ajar. Inside, everything had been rearranged. Nothing was missing, but things were in different places. My clothes were folded differently. My textbooks were arranged by color instead of subject. The food in my refrigerator had been reorganized. I called the police, but without signs of forced entry or theft, there wasn't much they could do. I changed my locks the next day and installed a basic security camera. A week later, I caught them on camera. Mom using the spare key I didn't know existed, letting herself and Dad into my apartment while I was at class. They spent hours there, touching my things, looking through my papers, sitting on my bed. The footage made my skin crawl. I took the video to the police station and filed for a restraining order. The officer who helped me, Officer Martinez, seemed genuinely concerned. "This is stalking behavior," she explained, "and it often escalates. Document everything." The restraining order was granted, but it only seemed to fuel their determination. They started contacting my classmates, my professors, anyone they could find connected to me. They told elaborate stories about my mental illness and how I'd abandoned them in their time of need. Most people saw through it, but some didn't. I lost a study group because one member believed my parents' stories. A professor pulled me aside to express concern about my family situation. The whispers followed me through hallways and across the campus quad. "Riley stuck by me through all of it. Narcissists hate losing control," she explained, as we sat in a quiet corner of the campus coffee shop, her voice steady and reassuring. "They'll burn everything down before they admit defeat." She helped me document each violation of the restraining order. She accompanied me to police stations to file reports. She stood beside me when I had to explain the situation to the university administration. 6 months into the program, I thought things were finally calming down. The calls had stopped. The accidental run-ins at grocery stores and coffee shops had ceased. I started to relax a little, to believe maybe they'd finally accepted my decision. Then I got the call from the hospital. "Your father's had a heart attack," the nurse told me. "Your mother asked us to contact you." I felt that familiar pull of obligation, that deeply ingrained response to their needs, but I also felt suspicious. I thanked the nurse and said I'd be there soon. Before going to the hospital, I called Dr. Reeves. He'd become something of a mentor to me, and I trusted his judgment. It could be legitimate, he said cautiously, but given their history, I'd verify everything before making any decisions. At the hospital, I found Mom in the waiting room, sobbing dramatically. She threw herself at me, clinging to my shirt. "He's dying, Jake," she wailed. "He's dying and it's all your fault. The stress of you abandoning us did this to him." I gently detached myself and approached the nurse's station. I asked about my father's condition, explaining that I needed to verify the information due to a complicated family situation. The nurse looked confused. "Your father is stable," she said. "He had some chest pain, but all tests came back normal. It wasn't a heart attack. He's being discharged within the hour." I thanked her and turned back to Mom, who was watching me with calculating eyes. She knew I'd caught her in another lie. "You were always too smart for your own good," she said, her voice suddenly cold and hard. "We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us." I walked away without responding. In the parking lot, I called Officer Martinez to report another violation of the restraining order. She suggested I consider pressing charges for harassment. The thought of taking my parents to court made me physically ill. Despite everything, some part of me still couldn't fully accept that they were doing this deliberately, that they weren't just confused or misguided. That changed the following week when I received an email from the university administration. They were investigating a complaint about academic dishonesty. Someone had reported that I was cheating on exams by using my pharmacy knowledge to access test materials in advance. The accusation was absurd, but it required a formal review. I had to meet with the Academic Integrity Committee, provide character references, and defend my academic record. It was humiliating and terrifying. If found guilty, I would be expelled from the program. During the investigation, it came out that the complaint had been filed by concerned parents who claimed I had admitted to cheating during a family dinner. They had even provided fabricated text messages as evidence. Thankfully, the committee saw through it. My consistent academic performance, combined with statements from professors who vouched for my integrity, cleared my name, but the damage was done. The whispers grew louder, the sidelong glances more frequent. "They're trying to destroy what they can't control," Riley said when I told her about it, her voice tight with anger on my behalf. Classic narcissistic behavior. I was beginning to understand that this wouldn't end until I took definitive action. The restraining order wasn't enough. Documentation wasn't enough. I needed to expose them completely. That night, I started compiling everything. Medical records showing their actual conditions versus what they'd claimed. Financial statements proving they could have afforded care. Recordings of voicemails where they threatened and manipulated me. The security footage of them in my apartment. The false academic complaint. Everything. I organized it all chronologically, creating a clear timeline of deception and abscess spanning my entire life. When I finished, I sat staring at my computer screen, feeling strangely empty. Seeing it all laid out like that, the systematic way they had isolated and controlled me was overwhelming. The next day, I took my evidence to a family therapist Dr. Reeves had recommended. Dr. Patel specialized in family trauma and narcissistic abuse. She reviewed everything carefully, her expression growing more concerned with each page she turned. "This is one of the most comprehensive cases of parental manipulation I've seen," she finally said, her dark eyes meeting mine with compassion rather than pity. "What they've done to you is emotional and psychological, Abby. It's no different from physical abuse in terms of the damage it causes." Hearing a professional validate what I'd experienced was both relieving and devastating. For so long, I'd wondered if I was overreacting, if I was the ungrateful son they accused me of being. "What do I do now?" I asked her, feeling the weight of 32 years of manipulation pressing down on me. "That depends on what you want," she replied. "Do you want them punished? Do you want them to acknowledge what they've done? Or do you just want them to leave you alone?" I thought about it for a long time. I want them to understand what they took from me, and I want to make sure they can't do this to anyone else. Dr. Patel nodded. "Then you need to be prepared for a difficult confrontation. People like your parents rarely admit fault. They're more likely to escalate when cornered." She was right. The next escalation came just days later when my landlord called to tell me my parents had contacted him, claiming I was suicidal and needed intervention. He'd almost called emergency services before deciding to check with me first. I thanked him for his caution and explained the situation briefly. He was understanding but concerned. "I can't have this kind of drama associated with my property," he said apologetically. "Your lease is up in 2 months. I don't think I'll be renewing it." I understood his position, but it was another blow. I'd have to find a new place to live while managing classes, work, and my parents' ongoing harassment. That evening, Riley came over to help me search for new apartments. We were scrolling through listings when my phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it. It was the director of the pharmacy program, Dr. Reeves. His voice was tense. "Jake, I need you to come to my office tomorrow morning. There's been an incident." My stomach dropped. "What kind of incident?" He hesitated. "Your parents came to my office today. They had some concerning documents. We need to discuss this in person." I hung up feeling suck. Riley put her arm around my shoulders. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it," she promised. The next morning, I arrived at Dr. Reeves' office to find not just him, but the dean of the pharmacy school and a university lawyer waiting for me. On the desk between us was a folder. "Your parents provided these yesterday," Dr. Reeves said, pushing the folder toward me. "They claim these are records of you stealing medications from your previous pharmacy job to supply their needs." I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were prescription records with my name as the dispensing pharmacist for medications I'd never handled. There were even photos, clearly doctored, showing me pocketing pill bottles. "These are fake," I said immediately, my heart pounding in my chest. I was never authorized to dispense medications. I was a technician, not a pharmacist, and half these medications aren't even stocked at the pharmacy where I worked. The dean nodded. "We suspected as much. The timestamps on some of these records show you dispensing medications during hours when class attendance records show you were here." Relief washed over me. "They're trying to get me expelled." "More than that," the lawyer interjected. "These accusations, if taken seriously, could result in criminal charges. This goes beyond harassment, Mr. Mitchell. This is attempted defamation and potentially filing false reports." I sat back, stunned by how far they were willing to go. They weren't just trying to control me anymore. They were actively trying to destroy my life. "What do I do?" I asked, the question becoming my mantra these days. The three exchanged glances before Dr. Reeves spoke. "We believe you should consider legal action, not just a restraining order, but a cease and desist order at minimum, possibly a defamation suit." The thought of taking my parents to court still made me queasy, but I was running out of options. They weren't going to stop. Each escalation was worse than the last. I agreed to meet with the university's legal counsel later that week. In the meantime, I continued gathering evidence. I reached out to former teachers who had expressed concern about my home situation. I contacted neighbors who had witnessed my parents' controlling behavior over the years. I even found William, the boy who had invited me to that birthday party so many years ago, now a dentist in a neighboring town. "I remember that day," he said when I called him. His voice bringing back memories of childhood games I'd only watched from windows. "Your dad told us you were too sick to come out, but we could see you watching from the window. We thought it was weird even then." Each person I spoke to added another piece to the puzzle, another confirmation that what I'd experienced wasn't normal or acceptable. The meeting with the legal counsel was eye-opening. After reviewing my evidence, she explained I had grounds for multiple legal actions against my parents. "But litigation is expensive and time-consuming," she warned, "and it often doesn't provide the emotional closure people hope for." She suggested an alternative approach, a formal mediation session with a court-appointed mediator present. This would allow me to confront my parents in a controlled environment with legal witnesses without the full complexity of a trial. The goal would be to establish clear boundaries, backed by legal consequences if violated, she explained, and to create an official record of their behavior. It sounded like the best option. I agreed to proceed with arranging the mediation. When the formal notice of mediation was delivered to my parents, they responded predictably, with escalation. They began calling everyone in my life again, this time claiming I was mentally unstable and pursuing legal action as part of a delusion. They even showed up at Riley's apartment, something that crossed a line I didn't know could still be crossed. They told her I had a history of fabricating stories for attention and that getting involved with me would ruin her life. Riley, bless her, recorded the entire interaction on her phone. "I thought you might need this for your case," she said, sending me the file. In the recording, my mother's voice shifted between tearful pleading and cold manipulation in the span of seconds. My father made veiled threats about Riley's academic future. It was chilling to hear them interact with someone else the way they had always interacted with me. The day of the mediation arrived. I dressed carefully in a button-down shirt and slacks, wanting to present myself as the responsible adult I had become despite their efforts. Riley drove me to the courthouse, squeezing my hand before I went inside. "Remember, they have no power over you anymore," she said. "No matter what they say or do in there." The mediation room was small and sterile, with a long table and uncomfortable chairs. The mediator, Miss Winters, was a stern-looking woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She explained the process briefly before my parents arrived. When they walked in, I felt that old familiar tightness in my chest. Mom looked frailer than I remembered, leaning heavily on a cane I'd never seen before. Dad had lost weight, his clothes hanging loosely on his frame. It was a calculated appearance, I realized. They were playing the roles of abandoned sickly parents. Miss Winters introduced herself and outlined the purpose of the mediation. My parents nodded along, occasionally glancing at me with assured expressions. Then it was my turn to speak. I had prepared what I wanted to say, but facing them directly made the words stick in my throat. I took a deep breath and reminded myself of Riley's words. They had no power over me anymore. For 32 years, I began, my voice steadier than I expected. You convinced me that my purpose in life was to take care of you. You isolated me from friends, education, and normal experiences. You manipulated me into believing you were too sucked to care for yourselves when medical records show that was a lie. I laid out my evidence methodically, just as I had organized it. Medical records, financial statements, witness accounts, the fabricated cheating accusations, the doctored pharmacy records. With each new piece of evidence, my parents' expressions shifted from injured innocence to cold anger. When I finished, Mom immediately burst into tears. How can you say these horrible things? She sobbed, her body shaking with what I now recognized as performative grief. After everything we've done for you. Dad leaned forward, his voice low and threatening. You've always had an overactive imagination, Jake. These delusions of yours are concerning. It was exactly what I expected. Denial, deflection, attacking my credibility. Miss Winters intervened. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, I've reviewed the evidence your son has provided. These are not delusions, these are documented incidents. For the next 2 hours, we went back and forth. My parents denied everything, even when faced with irrefutable evidence. They claimed documents were forged, witnesses were mistaken, and I was the one manipulating everyone. He's always been troubled, Mom insisted, her voice taking on that martyred tone I knew so well. We sacrificed everything for him, and this is how he repays us. The mediation was going nowhere. My parents refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing. They rejected every proposed boundary. They insisted I needed to come home where they could help me. Finally, Miss Winters called a brief recess. In the hallway, she pulled me aside. They're not going to concede anything, she said frankly. People with their psychological profile rarely do. We need to focus on establishing legal boundaries regardless of their agreement. When we returned to the room, Miss Winters presented a formal document outlining restrictions. No contact with me, my friends, my employers, or my educational institutions. Any violation would result in legal consequences, including potential arrest. This isn't a negotiation, she explained when my parents began to protest. These terms will be submitted to the court regardless of your agreement today. Dad's face turned red with anger. You can't do this. He's our son. We have rights. Your rights don't include harassment, stalking, or defamation. Ms. Winters replied calmly. Mom tried a different approach, turning to me with tears streaming down her face. Jake, sweetie. You know we only want what's best for you. We're your parents. We love you. For a moment, I felt that old pull, that lifetime of conditioning telling me to give in, to take care of them, to be the good son they wanted. But then I remembered everything they'd taken from me, everything they were still trying to take. If you loved me, I said quietly, you would want me to be happy. You would want me to have my own life. We gave you everything, Dad shouted, slamming his hand on the table. Everything. And this is how you repay us? I looked at him calmly. You gave me nothing. You took everything. And I'm taking it back. The mediation ended with my parents storming out, refusing to sign the agreement. But as Miss Winters assured me, their signature wasn't necessary. The court would issue the order based on the evidence. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt lighter somehow. Not completely free. I knew this wasn't truly over, but lighter. Riley was waiting for me, her face anxious. How did it go? She asked. I took a deep breath. Exactly as expected. They denied everything, played the victims, and refused to sign anything. She nodded, unsurprised. So what happens now? Now, I said, taking her hand, I keep living my life, and they have to live with the consequences if they try to interfere again. The court order came through 2 weeks later. It was comprehensive. No contact with me directly or indirectly. No contact with anyone associated with me, and they had to stay at least 500 feet away from my home, workplace, and the university. I felt relieved when I got the official document, thinking maybe now they'd finally back off. I was wrong. The very next day, I found a letter slipped under my apartment door. No envelope. Just a folded piece of paper with my mom's handwriting. It was filled with the usual guilt trips about how I was killing them with my selfishness and how God would punish me for abandoning my parents. I took it straight to Officer Martinez, who documented as a violation of the court order. We'll give them an official warning, she told me. But if it happens again, we can arrest them. I nodded, but I didn't feel good about any of this. Despite everything, the thought of my parents being arrested made me feel suck. Riley noticed my mood when I met her for coffee later. You still feel guilty, she observed, studying my face with concern. After everything they've done, I stirred my coffee absently. 32 years of conditioning doesn't disappear overnight. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. No. But it gets easier. Trust me. For a few days, things were quiet. I focused on my classes, threw myself into studying, and tried to build something resembling a normal life. Riley and I started dating officially, which felt both terrifying and wonderful. I'd never had a real relationship before, and I was constantly afraid I'd mess it up by being too needy or too distant. Just be yourself, Riley would tell me. That's all I want. The problem was I didn't really know who myself was. I'd spent my entire life being what my parents needed me to be. Finding my own identity was a daily struggle. Then the calls started coming to the pharmacy where I worked. Hang-ups at first, then breathing, then finally my mother's voice, alternating between sobbing and threatening. Mr. Phillips installed caller ID after the third call and blocked their number. These people are unbelievable, he muttered after hanging up on my dad. No offense, Jake. None taken, I assured him. I know exactly what they're like. The next escalation came when they somehow found Riley's parents' phone number. They called them late one night, telling elaborate lies about me being violent and unstable. Thankfully, Riley had already told her parents about my situation, so they recognized the manipulation immediately. My dad told them if they called again, he'd report them to the police, Riley told me the next morning. They hung up pretty quick after that. I felt a wave of gratitude toward Riley's family. They'd welcomed me without hesitation, included me in dinners and family game nights. Her mom, Barbara, even started sending me home with leftovers, insisting I was too skinny. It was my first experience with normal family dynamics, and it was both comforting and painful to see what I'd missed. The violations continued, each one documented and reported. Letters under my door, calls to my workplace. Once, they even approached a classmate in the parking lot, trying to get a message to me. Officer Martinez was growing increasingly concerned. This pattern of escalation is troubling, she told me after the fifth violation. They're not respecting the legal boundaries at all. I knew what she meant. Each violation was bolder than the last, as if they were testing how far they could push before facing real consequences. The answer came 3 days later when I walked out of my pharmacology class to find them waiting in the hallway. My heart nearly stopped when I saw them. Dad looked angry. His face flushed red. Mom was crying, of course, clutching a handkerchief dramatically. Before I could react, they approached me, ignoring the other students streaming past. Jake, this has gone far enough, Dad said, his voice carrying that familiar threatening tone. You need to come home now. I backed away, bumping into other students. You can't be here. There's a court order. Mom reached for me, her thin fingers like claws. We're your parents. No court can keep us from our son. By now, people were staring. I felt panic rising in my chest, that old familiar feeling of being trapped. Then suddenly, Dr. Reeves was there, stepping between us. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, you need to leave immediately, he said firmly. Campus security has already been called. Dad tried to push past him. This is family business. Stay out of it. Dr. Reeves didn't budge. This is university property, and you're harassing a student. That makes it my business. Security arrived moments later, followed by actual police. My parents were escorted off campus, screaming about their rights and how I was brainwashed. I stood there shaking until Riley arrived, having heard about the commotion from another student. Are you okay? She asked, wrapping her arms around me. I wasn't okay. I was humiliated, terrified, and angry all at once, but I nodded anyway, letting her lead me to a quiet bench outside the science building. Officer Martinez called me that evening. They've been arrested for violating the restraining order, she explained. They'll have a bail hearing tomorrow morning. I felt that familiar twist of guilt. What happens now? That depends on whether you want to press charges, she said. Given the pattern of harassment, the DA might pursue charges regardless, but your testimony would make the case stronger. I thought about it all night. The idea of testifying against my parents in court made me physically ill, but the alternative was letting them continue their harassment until something worse happened. In the morning, I called Officer Martinez and told her I would testify if needed. She sounded relieved. You're doing the right thing, Jake, she assured me. Sometimes the only way to stop this kind of behavior is with serious consequences. My parents were released on bail with electronic monitoring bracelets and strict orders to stay away from me. For a few blissful weeks, it worked. I didn't receive any letters or calls. They didn't show up at my workplace or the university. I started to relax a little, to believe maybe they'd finally gotten the message. Then one evening, I came home to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My blood ran cold as I pushed it open slowly. Inside, everything was trashed. My books torn apart, clothes shredded, furniture overturned. On the wall above my bed, written in what looked like red paint, were the words, "Ungrateful son." I backed out slowly and called the police. They arrived quickly, taking photos and dusting for fingerprints. Officer Martinez looked grim as she surveyed the damage. "This is a significant escalation," she said. "Destruction of property, breaking and entering. This goes beyond harassment." I nodded numbly, trying to process what I was seeing. It had to be them, right? Who else would do this? She looked uncertain. "Their monitoring bracelets should have alerted us if they came near your apartment. We'll check the logs, but what? They might have hired someone," she said reluctantly. "It happens sometimes when people are determined to harass but can't do it themselves." The thought made me feel suck. The idea that they would pay someone to terrorize me was somehow worse than them doing it themselves. I couldn't stay in the apartment that night. Riley insisted I come to her place, setting up the couch with blankets and pillows. I lay awake most of the night, jumping at every sound, wondering how much worse things would get. The next day, Officer Martinez called with news. "We checked the monitoring logs. Your parents haven't left their house in 3 days, so they hired someone," I said, feeling that suck feeling again. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe it was someone else entirely. Do you have any other enemies we should know about?" I didn't. My entire life had been so isolated that I barely knew anyone outside of school and work, let alone had enemies. But then a thought occurred to me. "My dad has a brother," I said slowly. "Uncle Taylor. They've always been close. I haven't seen him in years, but Officer Martinez made a note. We'll look into it. In the meantime, you should stay somewhere else until we can secure your apartment better." I ended up staying with Riley for the next week, while my landlord installed better locks and a security system. The investigation revealed it was indeed my uncle who had broken in, acting on my parents' instructions. They had called him repeatedly from their landline, which wasn't monitored like their cell phones. Both my parents and my uncle were arrested. This time, bail was denied due to the escalation of their behavior. The district attorney decided to pursue criminal charges for harassment, stalking, breaking and entering, and destruction of property. The trial was set for 3 months later. In the meantime, I tried to focus on my studies and rebuilding my life. I found a new apartment in a secure building with cameras and a doorman. Riley helped me furnish it with secondhand furniture and cheerful posters that made it feel like a real home. Dr. Patel, the therapist, became a regular part of my life. Our weekly sessions helped me process the years of manipulation and begin to understand who I was outside of my parents' influence. "Recovery isn't linear," she reminded me often. "There will be good days and bad days. The important thing is that you're moving forward." And I was. Slowly, painfully, but definitely forward. I made friends in my program. I discovered I enjoyed hiking and photography. I learned to cook simple meals instead of just preparing food for others. Small steps toward a normal life. The trial itself was both worse and better than I expected. Worse because sitting in the courtroom watching my parents glare at me from the defendant's table was excruciating. Better because finally, other people were witnessing their behavior and calling it what it was, absy. The prosecution presented my evidence methodically. Medical records showing their exaggerated illnesses, financial documents proving they could have afforded care, witness testimonies from neighbors, teachers, and even William, who described how they had isolated me as a child. The security footage, the letters, the phone calls, the destruction of my apartment, all of it laid bare for the court to see. My parents' defense was predictable. They claimed they were concerned parents trying to save their troubled son from himself. They painted me as mentally unstable, ungrateful, and delusional. But their story fell apart under cross-examination, especially when confronted with the medical records showing they had lied about their conditions. The most difficult part was my own testimony. Standing in the witness box, feeling their eyes on me as I described my childhood, the isolation, the manipulation, the constant guilt, and fear. My voice shook at times, but I got through it, focusing on Riley's encouraging smile from the gallery. When the verdict came back, I felt no satisfaction, just relief. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced them to 3 years in Pekin, with mandatory psychiatric evaluation and treatment. They were led away in handcuffs, my mother sobbing dramatically, my father stone-faced and silent. Outside the courthouse, Riley hugged me tightly. "It's over," she whispered. "It's really over." But was it? Part of me wondered if anything would ever truly change them, if any amount of punishment or therapy could make them see what they had done. Dr. Patel addressed this in our next session. "You can't control whether they change or understand," she told me gently. "You can only control your own healing process." And that's what I focused on. Healing. Building a life. Moving forward. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter from the prison psychiatrist who was treating my parents. He wanted to meet with me to discuss their progress. After consulting with Dr. Patel, I agreed. Dr. Quinn was a serious man with kind eyes. He met me in his office at the University Medical Center offering me coffee before getting to business. "Your parents have been diagnosed with shared delusional disorder," he explained. "It's rare, But it happens sometimes in close relationships where one person's delusions are adopted by another. I nodded, not really surprised. Can it be treated? To some extent, he said carefully. Your father is responding well to medication and therapy. He's beginning to recognize the harm they caused. Your mother is more resistant. He paused, studying my face. They've expressed interest in family therapy. With you, my immediate reaction was absolute refusal. After everything they'd done, why would I subject myself to more manipulation? I'm not suggesting you do it, Dr. Quinn clarified quickly. I'm simply passing along the request. The decision is entirely yours. I told him I'd think about it, though I was pretty sure my answer would be no. When I discussed it with Riley later, she was supportive, but cautious. Whatever you decide, I'm with you, she said. But don't do it out of obligation or guilt. Do it only if it helps your healing. Dr. Patel had similar advice. There's no right or wrong answer here. Some people find closure through confrontation. Others find it by moving on completely. I thought about it for weeks. What did I want? Closure? An apology? Some acknowledgement of the harm they'd caused? Or did I just want to move on with my life and leave them in the past? In the end, I decided to meet with them once, with both Dr. Quinn and Dr. Patel present. Not for their sake, but for mine. To say the things I needed to say face to face without court procedures or legal language between us. The meeting was set for a Tuesday afternoon. I was nervous all morning, changing my shirt 3 times before Riley finally took my hand and told me to breathe. Remember who you are now, she said. Not who they tried to make you. The prison meeting room was small and sterile. My parents were already there when I arrived, sitting side by side at a metal table. They looked different, older, smaller somehow. Dad had lost more weight. Mom's hair had gone completely gray. Dr. Quinn introduced Dr. Patel, explaining she was there to support me. Then he stepped back, giving us space to talk while remaining present. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Dad cleared his throat. You look well, he said awkwardly. I nodded but didn't respond. I had prepared what I wanted to say, and small talk wasn't part of it. I'm not here for reconciliation, I began, feeling my heart race but keeping my voice steady. I'm here to tell you that despite everything you did to me, I'm building a good life. I'm succeeding in my program. I have friends, a relationship, a future, all the things you tried to take from me. Mom started to interrupt, but Dr. Quinn gently stopped her. Let him finish. I don't hate you, I continued. Hate would mean you still have power over me. I don't forgive you either, at least not yet. Maybe someday. But right now, I just want you to know that you failed. You didn't break me. You didn't keep me. I'm free, and I'm never going back to that life. Dad looked down at his hands. We thought we were protecting you, he said quietly. The world seems so dangerous. No, I said firmly. You weren't protecting me. You were controlling me. There's a difference. Mom was crying now. Real tears for once. Not the dramatic sobs she usually produced. We love you, Jake. We always loved you. I shook my head. That wasn't love. Love doesn't take. Love doesn't isolate. Love doesn't manipulate. What you did was the opposite of love. We talked for another hour. They tried to justify their actions. They expressed regret, though it seemed more about getting caught than about what they'd done. Dad showed more insight than Mom, acknowledging that their behavior had been wrong, even if he still struggled to fully understand why. At the end, as I stood to leave, Mom asked the question I'd been expecting. Will you come back? Will you visit us again? I looked at her. This woman who had stroked my hair and told me God made me special to take care of them. Who had stolen my childhood, my education, my chances at happiness? Who had tried to destroy my new life when I finally escaped? I don't know, I answered honestly. That depends on you. On whether you truly understand what you did and take responsibility for it. Not just in words, but in actions. As I walked out of that room, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of closure. The start of truly putting the past behind me. Riley was waiting outside as she promised she would be. She didn't ask questions, just hugged me tightly. Let's go home, she said. Home. Such a simple word, but it meant everything to me now. Not the prison of my childhood, but the place I was building for myself. A place of freedom, of choices, of possibilities. As we walked to the car, I looked back at the prison building one last time. My parents would be in there for 2 more years. What happened after that was up to them. Whether they changed or not, whether they ever truly understood what they'd done, none of that determined my future anymore. I was free, and I was never going back.